we stayed in actually really good touch. Some people you kind of drift in and drift out, but with Jeff and Joan, we've actually stayed in really good touch. And I remember visiting Jeff shortly after the pandemic had let people back in after things had opened back up. And Jeff was recording some new piano music he'd written. I'm like, oh, what is it for a show or a movie? He's like, oh no, I just wrote some stuff. And he kind of gradually explained it to me, and then all of this started taking shape on why he wrote these New York City etudes and the reason behind this, and it's kind of just all kept going. He did a concert very similar to what we're going to be doing tonight, which is he's going to talk a little bit about the pieces, what they mean to him, and then afterwards there'll be some time for questions from everybody, anything and everything, I think, relating to what he's working on, and then he came up here and played trumpet. I might say he's a trumpet player. I knew he was a piano player too, but he played trumpet a year ago with Paul Winter. We did a concert here, and he heard this piano. He said, that piano sounds pretty cool. I said, yeah, it's a pretty cool piano, and hoping that could do some project. And then this slowly took shape. He said, I might want to do the etudes here. And I'm like, that would be cool. And then when we started talking about it, lo and behold, he became a Steinway artist. This is my trumpet player friend becoming a piano Steinway artist. And it's cool because the live stream tonight was promoted by Steinway, which we're very grateful for. And this is an incredible piano. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend Jeff Beal.
As Kim said, trumpet is my first instrument, piano is my second instrument. So when I was first writing these pieces, there's a couple themes about wellness that I'm going to go talk on tonight as I go through the music. And one of them, I guess one of the themes is lifelong learning. Stephanie spoke before, and if you don't know, for those who were just joining us on the live stream, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2007. And so most of my brain lesions were actually in a part of the brain that Stephanie mentioned that connects to right and left hemispheres. It also happens to be the part of the brain that's hyperdeveloped in musicians. This is very important to me because obviously I have multiple sclerosis, but I think the lifelong learning theme is resonant for all of us because obviously a lot of us, unless we have if we don't have a catastrophic illness, living into your 90s is pretty much the norm these days. I'm 61, so I'm looking at 30 years. So the question is, how do you maintain your quality of life? And I've loved playing the piano. I did have piano teachers when I was a kid, and I'd start practicing, but I'd get bored and I'd want to write music, and I'd go on. And it's kind of like that's how it's been the last 50 years of music making. So long story short, when I wrote the etudes and I was getting ready to play them for the first time in public in Prague, and I said, let's do a couple house concerts because I want to do this. So this is actually my favorite way to present this music. And when I saw this space and this amazing instrument, I thought this would be the perfect place. So thanks for coming. The first ones, the etudes, which are now recorded, they're recorded on the same piano. We moved out from California about 4 years ago, 2021. They're pretty much in order. And this first one is called Riverside Revelations, and the inspiration for this was quite simple but quite beautiful. Right after we moved to New York City, the mayor, you know how we were all wearing masks even outdoors, right? He said, it's finally, you can take your mask off outside. And you remember that feeling of just walking randomly and seeing other human faces and how beautiful that was, because we hadn't seen a human face in almost 2 years. And it was incredibly hopeful and incredibly beautiful. It was springtime in New York City. My wife and I live right next to Riverside Park, so this is Riverside Revelations. So now I want to talk a little about this instrument, which is part of the reason I wanted to come here. So this is a Steinway D, which is the largest piano Steinway makes. It's the grand piano. It's the type of piano that if you play in Carnegie Hall or Lincoln Center, this is what they put on the stage if you're going to play a big Mozart or Rachmaninoff concerto. This particular piano is quite famous. It was actually the favorite piano of a few pianists like Vladimir Horowitz, Leonard Bernstein also, and there was a group of 4 pianists in the mid-20th century who also loved this piano. In fact, this piano was so well loved at a certain point it was being fought over. Skitch Henderson's, I believe his son-in-law, is that correct? Was a member of the Steinway family, so there was a connection there. Mr. Steinway got so frustrated, and if you see the top of this, if you come up and see it, it's got kind of beat up. He was so tired, he said, I think it's time to retire this piano. I mean, a grand piano that's it has a life. So somehow, I think Skitch Henderson's wife found out the piano was going to be retired. He said she bought it. So she bought the piano. It's here. And it's a treasure, you know. It's really kind of almost, it's awe-inspiring, almost a little intimidating to play it, thinking about who played this. But I mention that also because, you know, I'm a trumpet player, and you heard in the first piece, part of what I love about piano music is the way in which a piano can sing. Even though it's really a percussion instrument, I always am trying to get the warmth and the sound out of the piano. It really goes back to my earliest days as a composer. We had an old upright piano that my dad eventually moved into the garage, and I would sit there and just play chords, and just the way the harmonics rings. And you see I'm playing these from memory, so I took off the music stand. So really part of the sound bath, part of this sort of very peaceful hour for you is just enjoying the resonance of the instrument. And I say that as a good introduction to these next 2 Études, because they are very much about the sound of the piano and just sort of the sonorities that are happening. They're very still. The first one is called Sun Surrounds Us, and the second one is called Invocation, which I dedicated to my wife Joan, because that happens to be her favorite one. A lot of these titles I did not come up with, because when I first played them, they were just numbered 1 through 10. So these 2 titles came from people in the audience. I just started polling people, giving me ideas. And I love that, because part of what I love about concert music is the story you make the own story as you're listening to it. Like, I don't know what you heard in the first piece, but it's okay if it had nothing to do with Riverside Park and masks, obviously. I don't even know if it does. It's just, that was the association. Sun Surrounds Us, I loved, because there is a way in which it's still, but I think about that way when you're sitting in the sun and it's just hitting you, that sort of peaceful feeling when you don't need to go anywhere, and it's very still, but you're not like, I gotta look at my phone, you're just somehow like, turn it all off. And I guess that's another theme of this music. I think what inspired this music, one of the things I think it definitely came out of the pandemic, so it was a reflection on that. But I think this music in a lot of ways is an answer to what I think is an incredibly noisy, complicated, stressful world. I think we've all thought, maybe at some point we thought technology was going to make our lives simpler, but it's actually made it a lot more stressful and complicated and distracting. So these pieces, these next 2, they're a little bit of guided meditations too, for lack of better words. The last thing I'll say is, loving piano music, I have to mention some of my influences. You might have heard a little bit of maybe Eric Satie in the first one. The next 2, I think about, you know, the first like pianist composers, I think, to really think of the piano in a different way were probably the French composers. So I think of Debussy and Ravel in this next one. And then Invocation, I think about the great jazz pianist Bill Evans, which you ever heard him. He had a way of doing the same thing that Debussy, but with more sort of modern jazz chords. I got to tell you a very funny story. When I played him in Prague that year, somebody came up to me, furious about that. He goes, "That piece, he was like, it was so repetitive and it didn't go anywhere." And it's like, I thought about it for a second, because when somebody gives you criticism, you got to think about it. Was that right? And I came to the conclusion that he didn't have the capacity to sit in stillness. That's why I mentioned that meditative thing before he listened to, because some music is directional and tells us it's going to do something other music doesn't. So I could feel in the room you guys were all with me. Thank you. And the fireworks will happen. Let's get a little more exciting as we go on, I promise. But it starts out still and peaceful. I need my prop for the next one, because the next one I dedicated to my mom, Rosemary, and it's really nice to have my sister Karen here, who's visiting from California. But Rosemary is living in assisted living in Grass Valley, and she's a fine pianist. She's played her whole life. And as I was composing these, part of the nice thing about these etudes is they're very playable, because I'm very much an intermediate player. I'm not Yu Zhi Wang or Lang Lang. And I thought, and I wanted to encourage my mom to play the piano, so I said, well, maybe if I send her something, maybe she gets something her son wrote, it would get her, she might want to play piano, so I sent it to her, and I think she played it. Although she said it had too many sharps in it, so it's not the easiest one, so. But I dedicated it to her, and I also wanted to show you this. This is the sheet music, because I published these pieces. And if you go on my website, the link is easy to find. Part of what I want to do with this music, is encourage people who are musicians to play music, or if you're an amateur player, to go back to playing piano. I realize for me, I think being a musician, all the years of living with MS has been great for my health and my brain health, but I definitely think playing piano has been especially great for my brain health. And Stephanie mentioned something earlier on about the independence of the left hand, the right hand, motor skills, immersion, calm. There's so many things, and obviously in the case of me, somebody that's learning something that I didn't, spend as many hours as I did as a young person learning the trumpet. So Also, if you're a teacher, I feel like there's some of these that are like that. The second one, hand crossing, there's some very basic things that maybe give some intermediate students a chance to play something. It's a little more different than the usual repertoire. So this is called I'm With You, in parentheses for Rosemary. The next one is not my title. Somebody called it Elation. Somebody suggested Elation, and I thought that, because that sounds like the music. The feeling writing it, I would have called it, if I was going to describe the feeling of writing it, I would call it frustration. Because a lot of these etudes, like the one I just played, for example, you come up with a simple idea that you like, and you sort of iterate that, and that piece, once I had the initial core, it kind of knew what it wanted to be, and it was just the architecture of figuring out where to take that little motivic cell. This one, I had a similar idea, but I painted myself into a corner a little bit musically with it, because I discovered after I wrote it down and started notating it, that it was actually in a really strange time signature. It's actually an 11/8, which is not a usual musical time signature, very asymmetrical. So it was very fun, you know. I mean, part of the process of composing these, you'll see, is they get a little progressively more difficult. It's part of the fun of writing this was actually sort of, as I was composing them, working out my technique and figuring out how to not only say compositionally, but on the instrument what I wanted to do. So this is Elation. The next one I did title and I called it Gratitude. And you know, I heard there's maybe a little bit of Chick Corea in that, a little bit, and a little bit of Brad Mehldau. I'm thinking about my jazz pianist influences. And I can't play this next one without mentioning another one of my favorite pianists of all time, Keith Jarrett. He's made some amazing classical recordings, but obviously well known for jazz recordings, and especially his solo piano improvisations. And I thought, what if I kind of write a piece that felt like a Keith Jarrett improvisation, but was completely composed? Because I can't do what he does, but he would sit down and improvise a hymn tune, and it would be like a masterpiece. So this is very much in that style. It's very much in the hymn tradition, which I love. You know, I've thought about gratitude a lot, and I think it's something I think a lot of us struggle with it. I struggle with it, I think, for a very specific reason, because I think the default sort of setting of a lot of artists' brains is dissatisfaction and perfection. So for me, you know, it's like that is sort of the fuel. That's like a normal, very normal space to be in. But it's not very healthy. I mean, it can be good when you're making your art, that sense of adventure and really wanting to reach as farther. But I guess the best way I could share my feelings on this music and how I feel like playing this is a meditation on gratitude. I read it on the internet. It must be true. But it was a very good article about happiness. It was a study about happiness. So I clicked. It's like, okay, let me see what they learned. And they learned a lot of good things. One of the first things, which I love too, was, you know, seeking happiness as a goal is actually probably not a smart thing to do. It's actually, you're setting yourself up for misery. But a life lived with a sense of purpose is the result of that can often be happiness, and a deeper kind of happiness, which I truly believe that. Listen, when I was diagnosed with MS, I had to make a decision very early on. Am I a victim? Is my life a tragedy? I said, no, I didn't want to let my diagnosis or this new thing to be the definition. I just wanted to be something I'm going to have to work around, and that's obviously part of my mission now, is to live well with MS. But the other part, another little snippet of wisdom in the article I loved was basically saying practice active gratitude, and there was a key sentence in there. It said something to the effect of, active gratitude actually rewires your brain. And I love this. I mean, you see this in all sorts of psychological journals and wisdom. You know, it's a great thing for depression. Keep a gratitude list. Like, you know, we can't choose what the world does or what the world brings us. We can't choose our response to it. So the idea of actually trying to look at life with a spirit of gratitude, I think, is significant. And I'll mention whether wellness component, since I did talk about rewiring. You know, when I was first diagnosed with MS, I was looking for a hopeful narrative, because obviously I'm doing quite well with it. I'm very happy for that. There's a certain amount of luck and just randomness to it. But the part of it I can take ownership of is I felt like I read some books. I was like, I was searching for a hopeful narrative. And I bought a bunch of books on brain plasticity, because this is a relatively new science of 20 or 30 years, really. We've learned that we used to think the brain was set at 5 and that's it. If you have a stroke or whatever, you can't rewire. Obviously now we know that the brain can rewire, the brain can heal, the brain can, you know, and I just had my most recent MRI, and according to what the doctor said, you know, I've actually been really lucky. Is it white matter, right? Gray matter. Gray matter is the key. So my gray matter has been very, very consistent over these 17 years. Obviously, the MS lesions are still there. One of the things I realized, and my wife said something beautiful when I was diagnosed, which I have to share, which, you know, when she saw all those lesions in the corpus callosum, and she kind of looked at me, she goes, now I realize why you always keeping so busy musically and so active writing music. She said, you knew, somehow your body knew that this was good for you and you needed to keep doing this. And that, I think that's beautiful. And I choose to believe that as an important part of my narrative. You know, it's true. So plasticity is huge. And I guess the last thing, the thing I was going to close the thought on the MS. So I felt like, okay, I'm going to keep rewiring that brain. I've obviously been doing this for, you know, most people with MS, You have it years before you're actually diagnosed, so I'm sure had it for years. We all do this naturally. You see with stroke victims, they can actually regain function if they really work hard at it. So I think that's a very hopeful narrative. I also talked to a wonderful doctor from Columbia a while ago, and this is another narrative which I love. She said she's been doing a lot of research on people with MS, how they do, and this is inspiration for you if you're healthy, is that the way someone does with a traumatic disease or traumatic decline has a lot, the amount they have going in, the resources, the cognitive resources they have going into something tough, which eventually we all do with our bodies, entropy taking over, is a really good. This is very depressing. I'm sorry. No, it's supposed to be hopeful. No, it is a hopeful narrative, but it's a realistic narrative. The amount that we have in going in is a indicator of how we'll do, and I like that. I think that's really beautiful. So, this is gratitude. See, when I was a trumpet player, I had to talk a lot because I had to rest my lips between songs. I don't have an excuse other than I just realized I love talking as much as I love playing. And I realize I'm a story. A story is important to me. I mean, I'm a film composer, right? That's why I'm a Steinway artist. I'm a Steinway artist because I'm the guy that wrote the music for Monk and House to Cards and all that. I'm also a pianist, which I'm thrilled. But story is really important to me, and I think the stories that we tell ourselves are really important to us as well. Part of the fun of playing on these is just how much different the low register of a D plays versus the piano that I wrote and recorded them on, which was an O, which is a beautiful piano, but it's a totally different thing so I was really working on, wanted to really have you be able to experience the feeling of how much sound this beautiful instrument could put out. There's a bit of a seasonal aspect to the Études because I did write them in order, and I love the title that somebody suggested for this one. They thought they saw snowflakes, and this is Winter Snowflake, and it feels to me like thousands of variations on the same thing. Every snowflake's different, but I also feel like it's sort of just this sort of blanket of snow coming down. Thank you. The next one I did title, and I called it The More Things Change. Musically, it was a very simple compositional exercise on one note, a D, And all these little, I found these two little chords against the D that I felt make a very interesting thing. So then I said, well, I'm just going to play D through the whole piece. It's kind of like a Spinal Tap thing, you know. And then how can I keep the repeated D interesting over, you know, 4 minutes or whatever? But I realized after I wrote it, you know, and it's like, it was a fun title, but then I realized the title isn't really true to what you think about the more things change. The quote goes, the more things change, the more things stay the same. I think this piece is actually, the more things change, the more things change. That's what life is, right? Nothing's like, life is a series of changes. It's not consistent. So, but I guess the metaphor story I found in this was there's a feeling of persistence in this, and like just one foot in front of the other, which is basically how we get through life, you know. The default experience of life is suffering. You know, that's the truth of life. So how do we go through life gracefully and embrace difficulty and embrace hardship and embrace something of great struggle? And how do you make that? How do you find the poetry maybe in that, or how do you find the? Yeah, I think a lot of pain and suffering can be. I think trying to avoid pain and suffering can actually bring on more suffering. So I guess the point of this piece feels like it's like just go into it. Don't try to run over it from it. Just accept it or plow on through it sometime. It depends on what it is. So this is the more things change. And I'm going to play 3 in succession so you can just kind of be in music land and not have talking. So after that, I'll do the last 2, which are called Come Down Angel, again a title I didn't come up with but I loved. And the last piece is the simplest of them. It's called Corridors of Calm. So thank you very much. And just so you know, take a little break afterwards. There's a restroom room, but we are going to stay on the stream. We're going to do a little question and answer. So think about something you want to talk about. Anything we'll do a little bit of that after the music part of this. So thank you. Thank you again for coming. It's been so great. Thank you. 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 How about that piano, huh? Pretty nice. I already asked if I could take it home with me, and they said no. But it's really fun to play with it. I mean, I played this on a lot of pianos, and I think part of it, as I'm doing this, I'm learning. I'm thinking a lot, studying, and just paying attention to what the instrument is and what I can bring out of it. Hey, Kim.
Hey, so thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I needed that tonight.
Oh, good. I know. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
I know. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
would you be okay with going into some questions?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
I would
Yeah.
love for any and all. I just wanted to start out that in 2007, Joan and I were actually doing a concert together. I reminded her of this a couple of weeks ago. We were doing a concert together out in Los Angeles. She put together a choir for a concert I was doing at Royce Hall at UCLA. And on the day of the performance, she came to me and she said, Jeff was just diagnosed with MS, and I don't know what's going to happen. And I said, well, first of all, you're going to not do this concert. Choir's going to be just fine, and you're going to go figure this out. And Joan's been a big part of this journey, and here we are today. So,
I would have told you.
who would have known?
Yeah.
And just I've gotten to watch this journey too. So, love to have some questions from people. We have a handheld here.
Yeah, because of the stream, raise your hand, and
Yeah,
Kim
if
will
you
bring the mic to you. Yeah.
Get a mic.
I know. Showbiz.
Hello?
You're not going to hear it, but just speak into it.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Hey, I don't need it.
Well, it's for the people at home in the stream.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a lifelong singer-songwriter, but pop, rock, country, blues. I hear there's so many influences in what you do, and I hear it all. I'm a jazz lover and play that too a little bit. When you write, do you approach, first of all, do you approach film scoring the same way you approach something like this? In other words, I would imagine they'll put you in a studio and let you watch it, and you just write music when you feel it's necessary or addressable, or do you score the movie with a theme in mind when you see it? Or? That's my question, and also, I love your tone leading too, by the way. It's amazing. It's amazing. Do you have visual images in your mind when you're writing these things? Because I see a lot of New York City in this. You know, it makes me feel like how I feel as an artist when I'm in different parts of the city. It's just, it's a backdrop to all the visuals. But do you see things when you write, or is it just?
Yes.
Oh, that sounds good. I like the way that comes out of that. You know, emotionally.
I think the place part of it, which is interesting because it's certainly not intentional, but I think part of the reason we decided, there was a lot of reasons we moved here. One was family motivated to take care of Joan's mom. But I love the way, I think places influence you as an artist. And we've been in LA for 30 years, and I love the way in which a new environment just speaks to you and starts to, it just has this ubiquitous effect on you, right? So yeah, absolutely, that's part of it. I mean, this is a season of life. I think the question about songwriting versus film scoring is excellent, because in a lot of ways, film scoring is easier in the sense that it's teed up for you. You've got a story right in front of you. I mean, you've got a structure, you've got actors, you've got a scene, you have a dramatic context, obviously, and this is, these were particularly difficult to write just because of the instrument and my technique in doing that. But in general, because I've been writing a lot of concert music, I just did a violin concerto, a bunch of other pieces, and it's in these pieces. This is a little more soul searching because it's obviously more personal, or if you're so it's a little more. You create, for me, because again, I work from story. Eventually, some story has to emerge. The fun thing about these is there wasn't always a concrete story when I was writing it. Often it was just a musical idea that got it going. But so I'm a jazz musician, I'm an improviser, that's where I come from. So I'm a big believer in the unconscious mind. And that's why, everything I do is process. Even when I'm at the computer writing film score, there's an element of improvisation and play in it. But these two specifically were that because I didn't have the toys. I didn't have the computer in front of me. I mean, unlike most of music, I mean, I'm writing a new set. I've just got about 4 done. And I'm actually, as I write these down, I get a pencil and I scribble them onto music paper, which is actually really kind of fun because it just kind of makes the process a little more analog in a way, which I enjoy. I also think for me, you know, the process of finding, and a lot of these, I have to compose when Joan isn't home, like when she was in Connecticut and I was in New York. I felt, because it's really kind of vulnerable, because you feel like that, a lot of times you just riff, you know, if you're a songwriter, you know, a lot of times you're doing something, you just play an idea for hours and hours until, you ever see that, there's a great documentary on the Beatles in the studio doing their last album. It's like, that's how the magic happens. It's like you got to brick by brick, you know, find your way.
I get to work with lyrics, of course, which you know,
Yeah.
you're doing pure music.
Yeah.
So it's a little different because I can get thematically involved too, in terms of lyrics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else?
Other questions? Let me grab the mic from here. Oh, right next, perfect.
Yeah.
As long as the mic is here, right?
Yeah.
Jeff, I have 2 questions. And the first one is about the instrument that you're playing tonight, and the second one is about the etudes. But as a harpist, I know that colleagues of mine harbor a secret love for a certain range of the instrument. And you mentioned that etudes 2 and 3 were reflective of the beauty of this instrument, and I wondered if a range of this particular 199 stuck out for you in those 2 pieces. My second question is about, you had so many choices in terms of, you could have named these preludes, you could have named them miniatures, you could have named them a collection of pieces, and you chose etudes. And I'm curious as to how these reached out to you technically. Was this a compositional technique? Was this a technical technique? Was this a cerebral technique?
Yeah, and I think, you know, actually my manager at the time suggested the title New York Etudes, and I just loved it because it felt like process was a big part of this, because etudes, you know, they could be individual pieces. It doesn't, but you know, at one meeting of that is pieces for study, right? So in this case, I wasn't writing from a student. I was a student because I was discovering my voice on the piano as I was writing, and that was the fun. I mean, this is the lifelong learning part of this. It's like I'm 61. I've played piano my whole life on my film scores and everything, but really 3 years ago was the first time I ever just did what I just did for you, was to give a whole concert on this instrument, which was something, it was kind of a goal I had, because I want to be able to, wouldn't it be cool if I could just go into a room with one instrument and express myself as a composer in front of other human beings? And I'm not going to be note perfect, but still be able to get my music across. And that was I guess, the etude part of this. I actually I wasn't referring specifically to this piano in those 2 etudes, but I was talking about the sound of the piano as being a big part of them, right? All Steinway Ds, and this is a really fun, geeky piano question. I love this. I was wondering if you wanted to play these on harp, possibly, if they could be played on harp.
I was thinking
Maybe they could be played on harp. Yeah, some pedal changes, but it could be fun. Obviously, the low range of a D is always incredible because you got that length and string length, so that's always given. What really struck me, and when I realized as soon as I sat down to play this, why Horowitz and Bernstein, these guys loved it. Yeah, the top sings. It's the middle, which is one of my favorite parts of the register. The middle, it blooms in a really cool way, and I spent some time here before the concert just kind of doing a little tuning and doing some practicing and really trying to figure out. But I can see there's something really rich about the middle, which is not always the case with a piano this big. Sometimes the middle of a smaller piano is a little more, the harmonics are a little more contained. So I think that was some of that part of it. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Stephanie, do you have any questions?
I'm just wowed, just by everything that you were saying, and in particular about, you know, kind of how your brain health, how your health, you know, so if something comes along, like with the MS, that you're, you know, you have better prospects. When did you start performing at all as a musician, or practicing playing, whatever?
In general?
Yeah.
Oh, I started playing trumpet as a kid. So I was making music from my childhood onwards, my whole life, really.
Yeah, because in some of the research I was doing, especially before the age of 7, I mean, it's great after that, but
Yeah.
even before that.
Sure.
So you set the stage for yourself unknowingly, but it was interesting about what you said. Like, there are no coincidences.
Yeah.
And, but I just think that rings true for just everybody in every way about taking care of yourself, you know, wellness, like emotionally and physically and everything else. I mean, you are amazing. And I just, everything that you talked about was just amazing. So thank you
No.
so much.
Thank you. Thanks. It wasn't really a question, but I've got something I want to add to that. Two things I want to really thank Alessandro and everybody at the Silo for having me. There's a lot of volunteers and people doing the sound and video, and especially my good friend Kim for producing this whole thing. Yeah, I mean this whole idea of and I also wanted to give credit to my wife Joan, who's here with me, who has been a huge part of me living well with MS. I think it's not easy having MS. It's not easy being married to somebody with chronic illness, and so the spouse, the partner there's a lot of lifting emotionally that happens on both parts. And Joan never gave up. She was from the very beginning was like, no, we're gonna work. She really wanted to set me up, you know, and take care of my beautiful brain, as she called it, which I thought was such a beautiful way. So yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions? Phil.
Amazing, Jeff. Really
Thanks,
great
Phil.
to hear you play. So do you find it ironic that you have no less than half a dozen people jumping around video and recording this in a setting that you've done kind of to unplug? And how do you block all that out to do what you did today? And what's your advice to the rest of us to kind of do the same?
The live stream is it's hard as a performer. It's definitely not as natural as the other times. It's good practice. I mean, I wasn't perfect. You know, the first note on the left hand was a mistake. I was like, where? I just was like a little like, wow. But I have done a live stream before. We did it at the power station, you know. But I just like, well, you know, our trumpet teachers at Eastman, Barbara, always told me something which was golden. She says, if you're distracted or having trouble, just go into the music. Go into the music is her advice, and that's what I did here. It's like, yeah, there's cameras and blah blah blah, but you know. We're all here because we want to have an artistic experience, so I just try to mentally really go into the music. To me, that's where I turn off. You know, it's all another way of answering this, and it's great. It's a great discussion also about writing, and it's like the critical mind. How do you quiet the critical mind when you're trying to do something? The critical mind is obviously very useful when you're evaluating things or evaluating your own work, but often in the middle of a creative act, you're going more towards a flow state. And the good stuff, I find for me, the good stuff happens as a performer and as a composer when I'm in a flow state. So I think that also plays directly into the wellness thing, because again, going back to distraction and these things, which are guilty as charged, but these things are designed to take you out of a flow state. They're designed to make you scroll and be angry and distracted. Like, they have nothing to do with flow state. I mean, if you want to call it is a flow state, but it's a flow state of addictive, like unhealthy usually. Sort of engagement, as wonderful as these tools are. But so I think, you know, part of the message for me of being a musician, talking about in real life, you know, analog experiences, whether it's cooking, writing, making music. My architect's here, just being an architect. She's an artist. I've seen her I've seen her in the flow state. You know, my wife's a singer. Singing is a flow state. I love what you said about singing. So I think it's all about those. It's all about mental. And then this is my career. So I've had to do that, you know, like that. And you too. You know, you're a fan. You know, being a professional musician is an exercise in sort of a mental agility and agility in terms of dealing with stress or anxiety. Like, I think, you know, like if that's part of it's baked into what we have to do. Yeah.
Great. And Stephanie.
Yes.
Double dipping.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
what was really interesting was after that piece that you said the gentleman thought was repetitive. So when you were talking about it being meditative, like I just totally went into meditative state during it. So when you said that, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe I've gotten better at playing it too, because I think it was, no, seriously, because I realized it really worked, but it worked just because of that, so I have to really commit. I have to commit to, I need to make this a very meditative performance, a reading of this piece, because that's what it is. Finding the truth in that, and trusting that. And the thing that this is hard music to play because it's simple, because there's no net, there's no place to hide. It's trusting the experience that you're feeling is what other people are feeling, and especially when you do something like that. So thank you. I'm glad you felt it. Glad you felt it. I felt it too in the room. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone?
I have a question.
Yes.
You had mentioned earlier that your mother was a pianist.
Yes.
Now, did you grow up in a musical family? Is that how you were introduced to this world?
Thanks for reminding me that, because there's certain things which you can't take credit for, and I'm very lucky. But thank God, my mother was a wonderful, not a professional musician, but a music lover and a wonderful pianist. My dad loved music. He sang and later on played the guitar a little bit. But there was a piano in the house, so I was around music all the time. And just the fact that the instrument was there. Hey, this is a little plug for my new sponsor, Steinway. Put a Steinway in your house. You never know. Your kid might be the next, Vladimir Horowitz or somebody, Chopin. But so it was around the house. But I have to give some credit to. I'm a big believer in DNA and musicality, and not only direct family. Several generations back, on both sides were a lot of music. Both grandmothers were pianists, and especially I have to mention my father's mother, Irene, was an amazing pianist and improviser. She loved jazz. She actually, when I first started playing trumpet, she gave me some of my first Miles Davis records.
Oh, amazing.
Because she went to the Black Hawk in San Francisco when Miles recorded live at the Black Hawk. She also, the first record she ever gave me was Sketch to Spain, Miles Davis and Gil Evans, which kind of blew my mind. The cool thing about her I learned afterwards, because she could also improvise, and she would just sit and we'd have these afternoons. She'd just play the piano. My sister's here. She remembers it, what it was like, she did. And, but I learned after she passed from my aunt that actually she's, because I became a film composer, she said, your grandmother played piano for silent movies. And I love that. Because when you look at the way of modern film composer, it is, and we've kind of got the screens and we're kind of looking. And it's even sort of gotten even further along because I actually do a lot of music for silent movies now. I did a concert at Carnegie Hall in June of a score for the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And since we're on a live stream, I'll mention this as well. Kino Lorber is releasing my score to Dr. Caligari, which is an amazing classic sort of horror movie from 1923 on Blu-ray on October 22nd. So if you want to see a completely different side of my creative brain, kind of this a little more maybe towards the jazz or the House of Cards side, that was Caligari. So yeah. Thanks. That was a long answer to a short question, but
Thanks.
I heard she lived in Grass Valley as well. Did you say Grass Valley?
My mother does.
my mom lives in Grass Valley, California. Yeah.
And my family's from
Oh, nice. Yeah. That's from Karen.
there. Nobody knows
Yeah.
Grass Valley.
Yeah.
Carmine has a question back here.
Carmine.
I do. Hey, Jeff.
Hey.
So question, current projects and future works that we could look for you in.
Sure. I'll give a couple. I'm just starting, if anybody's a baseball fan, I just got hired. I'm going to do music for a documentary that R.J. Cutler is going to direct about this year's World Series, which is really exciting because it hasn't happened yet. So it's going to be really like almost ripped from the sports headlines. We're going to follow whatever teams get in it, and so that'll be fun. On the classical music side, well, I'm doing a new set. I've had so much fun doing these. And I have an amazing partner in these records. Platoon is my label partner, Apple Music Classical. And I'm writing another set, Études, because I love doing this. So I'm writing 10 more and having so much fun. And the last thing is another silent movie score. I actually just finished a new score to Fritz Lang's Metropolis. So amazing film. Hope to do that with live orchestras in the coming years. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming tonight, and appreciate it. All of you
Thank
came
you,
out tonight.
Tim.
So,
Thank you.
thank you. And I'd especially like to thank my good friend Jeff Beal for his beautiful music and just beautiful heart. So thanks very much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. That was fun.